Metal Jesus here, and today we're going to talk about another Hidden Gems video. Just kidding. So I know I said on my video, one of my videos a long time ago, that I'm pretty much only going to talk about music and stick to music. And for the most part, that's true. I have done that. But I also said that eventually, every now and then, I will still do a video game video. And this is one of those times. I felt the random urge to do a top 10 video of what I consider my favorite hidden gem NES games. They may not be hidden gems to you, but to me growing up as a kid, I never heard anybody talk about these games, and it was like my little secret that I had these awesome games that me and my brother would play. So stick around, fellow millennials and Gen Xers, and bask in some nostalgia. This is Dancing with Ghosts. This ambitious little game from Konami was also a lot of fun to play as a kid. This was back when most video games were brutally difficult, and this game is no exception. You play as Scott, who somehow gets transferred into a computer to fight a virus that's taken over. That would explain all the alien-like visuals, but doesn't explain why there is a sewer system inside the computer, but whatever, video games didn't have to make sense back then. I always thought the visuals for this game were amazing, and that alone made me want to play this game, even though I could never get past the second or third stage. Good Lord, this game brings back some memories. That constant Father Abraham and his many sons theme plays constantly throughout the entire game and bores a hole into your skull. I never knew this until recently, but this game was built on the Crystal Mines engine, which was a game I was unaware of. I don't know how legal or ethical that is, but Exodus game publisher Wisdom Tree seemed to do that a lot, so I'm guessing they would rather ask forgiveness than permission. Speaking of stealing from another game, ironically this game is bathed in Christian symbolism, and you even have to answer Bible trivia questions between levels. I bet my parents just loved that aspect of the game. You have to acquire all the jars of mana in every level, and you have enemies such as magicians and taskmasters who stand in your way, and you dispatch them by shooting out, wait for it, the Word of God. Yes, that's what those W's stand for. I could make an entire video on this game alone and all of the ridiculous ways they implement biblical terminology. The whole thing is kind of awesome in an ironic way. Like, these people dead ass made this game. This game exists. And it also happens to be really fun. And it also stands out like a sore thumb in your NES collection, so you just always know it's there. This highly underrated action-adventure game was developed by the bigwigs over in Nintendo R&D 3, the same people who developed Punch-Out and Pilot Wings, and the game that most people care about, Nestor's Funky Bowling for the Virtual Boy. This game was never intended to be released in Japan, therefore the main character is the most Americanized protagonist since Guile in Street Fighter. We play as 15-year-old Mike Jones, a super original name that they must have put a lot of time into thinking of. Mike goes to visit his uncle, who's an archaeologist. Once reaching the island where his uncle is supposed to be, he finds out that his uncle is missing, and then the real adventure ensues. Using a magical yo-yo given to him by the townspeople, Mike ventures through caves, fighting enemies and solving puzzles. Eventually you get other weapons, such as a baseball bat. How American! This game happens to be included on the NES Classic, so if you own one of those, now you too can experience the underrated classic that never made it off of the regular Nintendo. Like, seriously though, not even a Super Nintendo sequel? Monster in My Pocket. Before Konami became known as the company that makes Metal Gear Solid, they used to churn out quirky little gems like this game on the NES. In doing research for this video, I found out that this game was just a small part of a whole-ass world. There were trading cards, comic books, animated specials, commercial tie-ins. this wormhole goes pretty deep on a game that, as a kid, I just thought was fun and looked cool. Basically, the plot of this story is some warlock and his monster companions are trying to take over the world, and then he tries to shrink any monsters that go against him, but in doing so, he accidentally shrinks all the monsters. So the two monsters that are trying to save the world are the two main characters that you get to choose from. They pretty much have the same exact abilities. You can either play as the vampire or the Frankenstein monster. I always felt the vampire looked cooler, so I picked him. It's basically just an action beat 'em up, but you're fighting monsters in people's kitchens and other places. And everything's super small, except the world you're in. So it's like super unique and fun to look at. I highly recommend playing this game in 2-player mode. Man, this game is so fucking weird and cool. I don't know how my parents got it right so much in the games they bought for us, but this one was definitely a family favorite. This game is mostly an action platformer with some shooter elements added in at certain points of the game. You defeat enemies, which gives you currency to buy power-ups at the various shops. If Star Tropics felt very Americanized, this game feels very Japanese in tone, which is cool because their games never lack quirkiness, and I love that shit. I never hear anyone ever bring this game up when talking about hidden NES classics, so I gotta give it some love. Dude, I got some shit to say about this game. First of all, I'm sure we're all aware of the Angry Video Game Nerd episode where he goes off on this game, saying it's nearly impossible to beat, and it's a pain in his ass, and blah 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 blah. I'm sure his review made most people hesitant about even playing this game, and that's unfortunate. But this game is, in fact, awesome and absolutely a hidden gem. Is it hard? Yes, almost every original Nintendo game was hard. But is it fun? And is it one of those games that if you put in enough time into learning it, you could beat it? Absolutely. James Rolfe probably didn't spend enough time with this game and wrote it off as nearly impossible because he had another video to produce a week later. So he probably just spent a few hours with it. With all that being said, I've never actually beaten the game either, but that doesn't mean it's not doable. I couldn't get past a certain boss and I just gave up, but that was on me, not on the game. I mean, check out this art style. Not many games on the NES look this avant-garde. It's really a work of art visually, but why they had to tie in this game with the Street Fighter franchise, I will never understand. Hell, they even threw in Final Fight in the name, another popular Capcom franchise. I bought this game at a flea market when I was a kid just based on name recognition alone. I thought it was another Street Fighter game. And even though I was disappointed at first that it clearly had nothing to do with Street Fighter, I still enjoyed the hell out of it and its art style. Back before smartphones, it was really difficult to know what a game was like when finding it at a flea market or rental store. So oftentimes, all you really had to go on was the cover art. This is how I acquired Codename Viper. The cover looked badass, and there was no way this game was going to suck. And it didn't! Codename Viper is a fun run-and-gun action game where you are fighting against some crime syndicate and rescuing hostages along the way. It's a very straightforward game, but strategy is definitely involved. Enemies can appear out of nowhere, so your reflexes have to be on point. Though he may jump like a fucking weirdo, this game is definitely worth your time. Felix the Cat! This is the only game on this list whose physical cartridge I do not own. I don't know why I never acquired this game permanently, but I sure as hell rented it constantly from the gas station down the road. And yes, that was a weird random thing at one point in the 90s. Some gas stations rented out Nintendo games. Anyway, Felix the Cat nowadays is a very obscure cartoon that most people have probably never heard of, but he started out in a comic strip and made a damn good clock. I believe he got an animated show at some point in the 1980s, but either way, this game came into existence and it's damn fun. Though it may be one of the easier NES games out there, it's still a pleasure to breeze through it with the main point of interest being the magical bag Felix gets at the beginning of the game. The more Felix heads you acquire, the more your magical bag levels up into a more powerful weapon. It's really fun to watch Felix transform into a new incarnation after acquiring each new power-up. There are flying levels, water levels, underwater levels, and land levels. And with each level, Felix has a different set of power-ups that keeps the game feeling fresh. Like most of the games on this list, the physical cartridge is expensive as all hell on eBay, so just get the game digitally and thank me later. One game on this list that's not an action-adventure game is one of my other favorite genres, strategy. Rampart may look primitive in the graphics department, but that does not take away from its fun factor. Your main goal is to defend your castle against enemy ships. The battles last about 30 seconds, and then you get 30 seconds to rebuild the walls surrounding your castle. The objective of the game is to expand your walls to surround other castles and add more firepower to defeat the ever-growing amount of enemy ships. Things get trickier, though, the bigger your fortress becomes, and the pieces you are given to rebuild are like random Tetris pieces. And if you don't fully repair your walls in time, you lose. It's your typical unforgiving NES game, but it's totally addictive. This is the ultimate hidden gem on the original Nintendo. Shatterhand is Jaleco's masterpiece. Maybe that's why it's one of the only games that displays its actual name on top of the cartridge instead of just saying Jaleco like all of their other games. Shatterhand is an action-adventure game. Okay, if it hasn't become abundantly clear at this point, I really love action-adventure games, and that's one of my favorite genres. And most of the games on this list are action-adventure games. Get over it. You're this dude with this, like, metallic fist who can just punch the shit out of anything that stands in your way. And that's great and all, but what really sets this game apart is you eventually acquire a robot companion that has totally different abilities depending on the combination of symbols you get when smashing open certain boxes. If you get the same letter set twice, you turn into this badass robo-person who is invincible. This is one of those games that lets you choose the level you want to play instead of sticking you on some linear path like most NES games. I've always loved when games give you this option. This game definitely has a post-apocalyptic dystopian theme, and the alien level is particularly creepy, as is the final boss of that level. Speaking of which, all of the boss designs were pretty badass and creative. This game is in a league all of its own, and it would have been nice to have a sequel on the SNES, but this game just kind of feels so right in the 8-bit world, you almost wouldn't want to ruin the magic by making a sequel. It truly does stand on its own. So that was my list for what I considered my hidden gems for the NES. I know Star Tropics probably isn't a hidden gem at this point, but I never hear people talk about hardly any of those other games I talked about. What do you think about this list? Have you played any of these games? What did you think about these games? What are your top 10 hidden gems? Leave all that in the comments because I'm really curious to know. I know I still have a lot of gaming people who watch this channel, so make sure you like and subscribe and leave a comment and ring the notification bell. Almost at 8,000 subs, so that'd be cool to get to that this year. But yeah, until next time, have a good rest of your night.